The world is teetering on the brink of a possible third world war, which could end up in a nuclear Armageddon. I am not saying this. This is a clear statement, a clear threat held out by the Secretary General of NATO, who has said that the nations of Europe should be prepared to fight like their grandfathers and great-grandfathers had fought in World War I and II. They should be prepared for a third world war, because as per Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, the Russians are about to launch an attack on Europe. Actually, it makes not the simplest common sense for Russia to expand the war into Europe. Russia is close to winning the war in Ukraine. It is making slow but steady progress. It has taken Petrovsk, it has taken Severodonetsk, and it is expanding to the last bastion left, Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. The last two bastions left, defense lines left in Donbass. The whole of Luhansk province has been captured, over 99% by the Russians. About 82% or more of Donetsk has been captured. They are heading for the balance. And if they feel unduly pressured, it is quite likely that Russia will attack Odessa and cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea coast entirely, make it a landlocked country, and they could also go in for Kyiv. They have fully cooperated with the Americans in trying to have a comprehensive peace dialogue. They say we are not interested in a ceasefire. The United States and Europe has been showing all interest in a temporary ceasefire which will break the Russian military momentum, which will create, which will take the pressure off Ukraine, give it a breather so that it can continue the fight. The Europeans especially are extremely keen to see that they continue to fight Russia till the last Ukrainian standing. Ukraine used to have a population of over 42 to 44 million, which is now down to about 19 million, right? More than 8 million Ukrainians and more have had to flee. About 1 million Ukrainians are dead and about 200,000 have deserted. Yet there are people egging Ukraine on to fight. They are threatening that they had grabbed hold of, looted the Russian money in the European banks, and they want to give it all to Ukraine now, which is in itself an act of war, which is itself absolutely illegal. It amounts to looting. But they are threatening to do that because Europe's economy is on the path of ruin. The natural linkage, energy linkage, which had stood Europe in such good stead, was the energy linkages with Russia, which is geographically so close. That means the energy flows were cheap and the European economy was booming. Today, the European economy is on the brink of collapse. The Russian economy was supposed to collapse. The entire design behind the Ukrainian provocation was that it would collapse the Russian economy. The Russian economy has grown. You know, it has almost grown at 4% rate of GDP growth. It has become much better than it was before the war. Primary reason being that India and China have continued to buy cheap Russian energy. At one point in time, Joe Biden had suggested that America and China, that Russia energy be purchased by India and China so that the global prices don't shoot up to $120, $130 a barrel $120 to $130 a barrel, which would ruin the global economy, including that of the United States of America. It was on American prodding that India and China had continued to purchase Russian oil. Because if the whole world had piled on onto the Middle Eastern oil prices would have gone through the roof. Today we are being told India has particularly been penalized. 50% tariffs have been imposed upon India, penal tariffs have been imposed upon India, and for some strange bloody reason, the United States has chosen to embrace Pakistan. It suddenly finds Pakistan the most reliable military partner in South Asia, with the help of which it thinks it can kick Iran, it can kick Afghanistan, it can put pressure on India, and it can put pressure on Russia and China. Through whom? Through a country on the brink of economic collapse, a stupid country called Pakistan, on the brink of economic collapse, which is, the debt to GDP ratio has crossed about 200%. They are deeply in debt. Over $200 billion is what they owe to the various loaners. They are borrowing from Peter to play Pan. They are borrowing like hell from the International Monetary Fund to repay the loans of China, to repay the loans of Saudi Arabia, and yet that country has become one of the sheet anchors of American defense policy, because of which it has driven India into the arms of Russia, India, China triangle. 25 years of effort by the Americans and Indians have been brought to naught. But let's revert now to Ukraine. The Europeans are now pushing troops towards the borders of Ukraine. They are claiming that Russia is about to expand the war into Europe, which makes little sense for Russia to do so. Yet they are, projecting such hostile intentions onto Russia, and they are pushing their troops forward. A whole mobilization of forces, including American forces, is taking place in Europe towards the borders of Ukraine. This could easily escalate, as Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, has warned so clearly. It could lead to World War III. And World War III, unlike World War I and World War II, in World War II, 2 nuclear bombs were enough. Only America had nuclear bombs, and 2 nuclear bombs were enough to stop that war. This time, the bombs are with 9 different countries, the nuclear bombs, right? And if a third world war breaks out, it is in almost 100% probability likely to be fought with nuclear weapons. I hope the people of Europe understand what their leaders are up to. They are trying to push the world towards, brinkmanship, towards a third world war, towards a nuclear Armageddon. And here are people who talk of rationality, who talk of common sense, who lecture the rest of the world on, being rational, being logical, etc. Reason is the best, achievement of human evolution, and it has all happened in Europe. And it is Europe where World War I was fought, where World War II was fought, and the way they are going, don't be surprised if World War III breaks out in Europe in a matter of days, weeks, less than months. America was trying to repair relations with Russia. The logic is quite simple. If you have to go for China, you have to have better relations with Russia. You can't be making enemies of the rest of the world. But Europe is trenchantly insistent that they do not want the war with Russia to stop. They want a ceasefire which will give a breather to Ukraine, so that Ukraine can continue the fight and the pressure is taken off. Russia does not want to give it this thing. They said, we don't want a temporary truce, we want a large-scale peace settlement which respects the security concerns of both sides. There was no need for NATO expansion right to the doors of Russia. Russia had put down the last red lines as Ukraine and Georgia. When these were crossed, they went to war. They have gotten into a fight 4 years down, and they are still prepared to fight because their core national interests are being threatened. So this is as far as Ukraine is concerned, and we hope better sense will prevail. Now let's go to the other side of the globe, to the Western Hemisphere. United States has been threatening now for some time to attack Venezuela. It has steadily been mounting the pressure, accusing it of pushing drugs, peddling drugs to the United States. All its weakness of border control is being foisted onto Venezuela, right? And it has been slowly amping up the pressure in terms of attacks on Venezuelan boats which were supposed to be carrying drugs. They have been shooting, murdering, killing people, possibly civilians, in small little boats and yachts and ships. And now they have taken to arresting a tanker which was carrying Venezuelan oil. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves outside Russia, Saudi Arabia. The largest oil reserves in the world, 3 billion barrels per day is what it can provide. That is the basic root of the geopolitical problem. China has invested heavily in Venezuelan oil. So has Russia invested in Venezuela. And both Russia and China are keen to pay back America in its own coin. Just like America has been provoking conflicts in Ukraine and in Taiwan, South China Sea, the Chinese and the Russians now want to repay that compliment by helping hostile powers like Venezuela, Iran, etc. to fight against United States and give it a tit for tat. So if a war starts in Venezuela, it could have, it could spin out of control. It could have consequences far beyond the region. It could end up into, conflict escalation, conflict creep, and become an endless wars like the one that had happened in Vietnam, like the ones that had happened in Middle East and in Afghanistan. There could be mission creep. There could be unpredictable consequences. So therefore, it would be better for America to think before it gets into a war that becomes another endless quagmire and draws in American resources and lives. I don't think the people of America are in any mood to countenance being dragged into another war. Such wars are started in the promise and hope that they will be very short, very sweet, and give you a cheap victory. It doesn't very often happen that way. Miscalculations happen, and miscalculations could occur in Venezuela. Now let's take a look at China. China and Japan are exchanging very hot rhetoric which could easily spin out of control. The United States has suddenly realized that with the advent of hypersonic weapons, hypersonic missiles with Russia and China, the Patriot batteries can no longer stop the Kinzhals. The Kinzhals have been able to destroy the Patriot batteries because the hypersonic missiles come at speeds of Mach 5, Mach 10. They can change course, alter course in the middle of the attack, and it is not any longer a problem of simple ballistic trajectory which can be predicted, which can be countered. American weaponry was more attuned to fighting with weaker powers like Libya, like Iraq, like Afghanistan. America and Europe are not really up to fighting with peer group powers like Russia and China, which are now armed with hypersonic weapons. Even if China invades Taiwan with its hypersonic cruise missiles, it can ensure anti-access A2AD, anti-access area denial. And to that extent, there are great fears in American allies like South Korea, like Japan, like Taiwan, that they could be dumped. They could be left alone, just like America seems to have dumped Ukraine. Seems to have is more like it. I'm not very sure if they have dumped Ukraine entirely, because American troops have been moved towards the borders of Romania in Europe. So if you take a look holistically at the entire globe per se, there are chances of conflict breaking out in so many hotspots. Ukraine, there could be a major escalation. There could be another new conflict erupting in Venezuela. There could be conflict over Taiwan, over South China Sea, and the state of relations between India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh are not entirely the best of relations. These could also spiral out of control into a conflict, given Pakistan's penchant to wage asymmetric war against all its neighbors. Pakistan has been with great fanfare and aplomb bombing Afghanistan, a country that has no air force. It has been trying to wage unrestricted asymmetric war against India using explosives. 3,000 kilos of explosives were discovered in the national capital region. Another 15,000 kilos are said to have been inducted via Bangladesh, and it was talking of biological chemical warfare via ricin. It was training doctors to wage chemical biological warfare against India. I don't think such things can just be allowed to pass. The world is teetering on the brink of a third world war. Jai Bharat, Jai Hind.